Hey, welcome back. Today, we are diving deep into something we can all relate to, family secrets. We're going to look at how the quiet, painful tensions of a classic American play compare to the huge, dramatic family blowouts we see in movies today. You know, it's a journey from the stage to the screen, but it's also a journey from silence to speaking out. This really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? What actually happens when the people who are supposed to be closest to you just stop talking? When silence becomes the default language in a home? It's a story as old as time. But believe me, the way we tell that story has changed in a massive way.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll kick things off with the idea of timeless family secrets. Then, we'll look at a classic portrait of silence. After that, we're jumping into modern problems and modern voices, digging into how addiction is shown, and then wrapping it all up with the big shift to openness.
So, our story starts way back in the early 20th century with the Tyrone family from Eugene O'Neill's incredible play, Long Day's Journey into Night. Now, this family, they are the absolute gold standard for dysfunction. They are masters, absolute pros at saying everything except what they're actually feeling. So instead of having a real conversation, the Tyrones use these things as weapons and as shields, you know? Sarcasm becomes a way to wound someone without being honest. Denial is just papering over these giant cracks in their lives. And silence? Well, silence is the loudest sound in their entire house. It's just this constant, suffocating weight. And the result of all that is a total breakdown. Their conversations are just these broken little pieces of blame and regret. They talk at each other, never ever with each other. And it creates so much emotional distance that they basically become strangers living in the same house, just trapped in this cycle of pain with no way out. And the name for the villain in their story, the central problem, is this: emotional repression. This isn't just them being moody. Back then, talking about things like addiction or deep emotional pain was a huge taboo. It was all about pride and shame, which forced everything underground and created this pressure cooker of secrets. All right, now let's hit the fast forward button and jump ahead 100 years or so. How did today's movies handle these same gut-wrenching family problems? You'll see the issues are pretty familiar, but the way they're expressed, oh, that is a whole different world. Check this out. This slide puts the two eras right next to each other. On one side, you have the Tyrones, who are just paralyzed by this rigid repression. On the other, you have the Kapoor family from the 2016 film Kapoor and Sons. They've got similar secrets, an affair, a hidden identity, but their problem isn't silence. It's passive aggression and simmering anger that, and this is the key part, eventually leads to a huge explosive confrontation. And that is the main difference, right there. In modern stories, the fight can actually happen. We just have a much greater understanding of psychology now. You see it in shows like Euphoria, where families at least try to have an intervention, no matter how messy it gets. The pain is just as real, but unlike the Tyrones, the chance for healing, for some kind of resolution, is finally on the table. Okay, let's zoom in on one of the biggest family secrets of them all: addiction. The way we tell stories about this struggle says so much about how our society's understanding of pain and who's responsible has totally shifted. So for Mary Tyrone, her morphine addiction is this source of deep, deep shame. It's something that has to be hidden. It actually started from physical pain, but it was fed by her loneliness and her family's total emotional neglect. Instead of getting any support, all she gets is blame and denial, which just pushes her further and further into isolation.
Because in her world, that's just how it was seen. Addiction wasn't a disease or a health crisis. No, it was a flaw in your character, a moral failing. It was something you had to carry all by yourself, in silence and shame.
Now compare that to modern stories. In movies like Uta Punjab or Kabir Singh, addiction is a visible crisis, and it's often tied to things like trauma or outside pressure. The struggle is out in the open, and the story almost always includes some attempt at recovery. The entire conversation has shifted from being about morality to being about health.
So, what does this all add up to? Let's pull back for a second and look at the huge cultural shift these stories show us, this evolution from hiding our problems to, actually confronting them.
You can really see a clear three-step evolution. First, you had the era of denial and stigma back in O'Neill's day. Then, that was followed by this period of almost tragic glorification in movies like Devdas, where addiction was framed as this romantic, self-destructive thing. And that brings us to today,
an era of awareness, where we finally see addiction as a treatable crisis that demands a real response.
But you know, through all these changes, one thing, one truth, seems to stay the same. It connects the Tyrones to every family we see on screen today. The gap in communication. It's not about not having the words. It's about the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of emotional exposure.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We are definitely talking more about these things that used to be taboo. But is our conversation really getting louder and more honest? Or are we just finding new, more modern ways to avoid saying what we truly mean? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.